something like, let's go to the kitchen, let's go to the bedroom. I think you and I are getting a little bit sweaty. Let me get the shower going. Yeah, no, but yeah, no, but I mean, honestly, sort of like the audio is sort of becoming a lot fantastic. Again, sort of like they're sort of like they're incredible sort of for first attempt. Just to remember to sort of be a little bit forgiving of yourself for the first attempt. I mean, like if you go back on 42's first videos, I mean they're kind of bad compared to his older stuff. Sorry, compared to his newer stuff.
Yeah, and they're also shorter. Like his old ones used to be like 6 minutes, and now they're all like 20 minutes. So
yeah. See, the thing is sort of like being able to sort of like create that kind of content comes with experience. It's not particularly something that you can sort of like particularly. But so yeah, just sort of like be a little bit forgiving of yourself and sort of sort of. I remember sort of another one, Ed Sheeran. He it was an interview I think he did on the Graham Norton show. He demonstrated his very first recorded song, and it was so bad. Like he was such a terrible singer, and he pretty well said sort of like that. He said talent isn't really like in his mind. He says talent isn't really a thing. He said practice is. Practice is, and the best way to sort of practice things is to be able to sort of like complete things from start to finish. And but I mean, I know sort of you're the kind of girl sort of who likes to sort of put as much thought and detail into things, which means that what you do come up with is going to be absolutely mind blowing.
Yeah, that's also why I'm not trying to put like a time limit on it in this case.
Yeah. Just remember sort of just remember sort of like the most important thing sort of about this ex-listener is to be able to sort of like create a complete thing, and then you'd have sort of a baseline to work with.
Yeah, I know. I do want to like maybe do a couple of rewrites of at least parts of it and stuff until I'm happy enough with it for a first one. Like I am going to keep in mind that it is my first one.
Just don't be dissuaded sort of by potential criticism online, because like no matter how good you are at something, there will always be people who criticize you. Don't think about those ones. Just think about the fact that you would accomplish something you set out to do.
Yeah,
and that there would be people out there who would legitimately enjoy your content.
Yeah, and I know there's always going to be criticism if you put anything online, especially in a place where you're going to get a larger client base sort of thing.
Oh yeah.
So it's like I'm going to keep in mind some of it might be helpful if it actually has constructive criticism. Then I'll try to use it, but keep in mind there will be some people who just won't like it, and there'll be trolls, and it'll just be flame.
Oh yeah. Yeah, especially sort of like you'll have tons of people sort of have their own sort of interpretation of it. I mean, like I'm one of them. Just sort of like take in some of them, others sort of not so much.
Yeah.
You know, sort of. But if you listen to every single person, I think there's an Aesop fable on it. It's sort of about that sort of very concept that you can't please everybody.
Yeah, and I know you can't take on every suggestion, even from the people who like it. I can't remember the creator's name, but he made a series called Charlie the Unicorn to show what would happen if it was the guy who made llamas and hats. To show what would happen if he took on
I remember Charlie the Unicorn.
Yeah, it was if he took on every single suggestion. That's why he made it. He basically had everybody else write it for him, and he took every single one of their suggestions. So it's like, it was funny, but you can sort of see it parts. It's like, this is a little weird or a little weak. It's like, it sounds like a good idea in concept, but it's kind of weird, or it's just when you actually put it into practice. I can remember doing a similar thing like that in drama once. We were given 3 titles that we could make a short play of, and one of the original ones that we chose, I can only remember the 2 that we looked at, was Around the Bend, and we're thinking somebody could like look around a bend and see a group of people fighting, then step back a bit, look around the bend, and then they're dancing, and do that a few times back and forth between fighting and dancing, and then the last one they're just moshing. And it sounded really good in concept at first, but then we like came back to trial the next day, we thought about that, and we're like, that actually sounds pretty stupid. So we went with Mean and Green, where we had somebody who didn't like the colour green much, and her friends started playing pranks on her. I can remember the last one, which was tying a piece of string to a piece of green cloth to her foot without her noticing. So there was a green cloth following her around, basically, and freaking her out.
Yeah.
And basically they traumatize her, and she ends up in a mental asylum. And the last scene is in that asylum. They're like, we really need to constrain her, but we're all out of straitjackets. All we have left is the green chair. And they're like, but she hates green. It's like, we've got nothing else. We've got to try it. So they try to strap her down, and she basically escapes, and that's the final scene. Like, she escapes the asylum. So, Mean and Green, and the teacher did say to try and be original with the title, like, use it, but kind of come up with something that you wouldn't expect.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting way to go with something called Mean and Green, I reckon.
Yeah. See, if I were going to sort of do something like Around the Bend, sort of it would be sort of like a noir-esque sort of like play, sort of where the bend is basically sort of like a street corner or something. Well, not a street corner, but maybe sort of like a restaurant or something like that, and sort of it'd be sort of like demonstrating sort of like the kind of little short stories that happen in there. You know, so Mean and Green sort of, I'd imagine, sort of a dragon, sort of just like a real like a dragon that just keeps being woken up by knights. Like, I have come to slay you, and the dragon's like, you're slaying my sleep. Get out of here.
Yeah, I don't remember all the details of the like the
the
exercise,
they'd be my interpretations of it. Yeah, but yeah, no, what's the word I'm thinking of? Yeah, because the trouble is that sort of like with things like Child of the Unicorn and whatnot, is that when the story sort of comes, like the story obviously sort of comes from the creator that has sort of created the thing, it's very difficult to then sort of like create sort of a complete psychoanalysis of that character to create an accurate representation of it after the fact. You know, because essentially sort of when you're trying to sort of like expand on a character that has already been established by somebody else, you're having to sort of do so sort of from the perspective of the person who wrote it. Yeah. So, like, in something like Warriors, I'd imagine sort of that all the characters, like, at least the recurring characters, would have sort of, like, some pretty expansive synopsises. So when the various authors are writing them, they can use that, like, to, like, oh, would Fireheart say this? Or
actually, no, there is no series Bible or anything like that.
No?
They once said, your best source of, like, this sort of thing is the Warrior Cats Wiki, which was only actually done by a few people, and it's like sort of a little bit as to whether it's correct or not. Because you guys keep better track of this than we do. And it's like, we don't want to hear you say that, and you've got to sound like you're completely confident in your almighty godly powers as an author.
I mean, authors also sort of take their source material from anywhere. That was something I'd learned in
but this is
that was something I'd learned in sociology, that like source material can come from literally anywhere, and authors are people too.
Yes, but in this case, this was source material for like ceremonies and stuff that they'd already written, they'd already like established as a thing.
Yeah.
That you really should have an idea. Like you'd figure they'd have some sort of point of reference that they'd created themselves for how a warrior's ceremony goes, but no, they look at the Warriors wiki or some other fan source. It's like, no,
Well,
stop. You're meant to be the author.
Do you know how like it is so hard to keep up with lore, especially in an expansive story?
Yeah.
Like things like stories like One Piece, for example, which is sort of like one of the longest running manga series of all time. You know, sort of like trying to sort of keep up with all of the everything. Is like you run the author sort of runs into plot points, because when you have a story that sort of runs for 20 years or something, like it's very easy to forget. Very, very easy to forget.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah.
It is one of the reasons, though, in one of my blog posts on the writing blog, why I say read your own work.
Yeah, if anything, sort of, I would, if I was a sort of a fan wiki author, a fan wiki content creator, I'd be over the moon. Like, are you telling me that I'd contributed to the consistency of Warriors? Like, what?
Anyone can sign up and start posting on that. Like, people will edit what you're writing and maybe delete it if it's not very good, but you know. Yeah, like the Blue Star page, especially the parts that deal with Blue Star's prophecy, was written by somebody who really liked what was his name? Birch. Well, the guy who liked Blue Star.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Thrushpelt, that was it. They really liked Thrushpelt, so the entire Warriors wiki page has Blue Star cast in the worst light, making her seem like she was being really mean to Thrushpelt the entire time.
That's kind of sad.
And I'm just saying, because it's like a fan and creator site, you will have things like that. I mean, if it really annoyed you, you could go in there and change it, but although it's biased in how it's written, it's technically correct.
Well, yeah, because Blue Star sort of was almost sort of like any young girl. Sort of, she was naive, and she just kind of followed her feelings without thinking about what they meant.
Yeah, but it was just biased in how it was written, but the sources and everything and the quotes are technically correct. So it's like nobody's really bothered to edit it. They're just like,
that almost sounds like someone sort of projecting sort of with their sort of like their Taylor Swift sort of backstory.
They could have. They could have really identified with Thrushpelt and started to basically put more onto him than he was. Like
Yeah. Remember that Taylor Swift song? Like she wears short skirts, I wear t-shirts. He belongs to me. It's like that's basically sort of Thrushpelt talking about Bluefur. He is Oakard, I am Thrushpelt, Blue Stars we're looking to get with the River Clan cat. She shouldn't do that, she shouldn't do that. Do. But some people sort of have Bibles. I know sort of in Adventure Time they had sort of pretty extensive Bibles for the Bibles and character synopses for all the characters there. But
and that's what a lot of people were hoping the Aarons had, but it turned out nope.
Yeah, insofar as other shows, I think other shows like Bluey, they have clinical psychologists sort of on the team as well, and essentially sort of you have a team of all.
Well, that's also like a TV show, so it's like you can have the money to sort of employ things like that. Like I know Big Bang Theory, all the equations of the board and everything they say was scrutinized by actual scientists to make sure they're all real. It all made sense. But it's again, that's a TV show. It's they have the but if authors prepared or aware that their thing might become a bigger universe, then they some of them will actually start making some sort of Bible, sort of like how I've got that blurb about the backstory of pre-Wolf Tribe of all the characters.
Well, another one sort of was...
And I'm actually creating a more
like
detailed character questionnaire for each of them as well.
Yeah, like a couple others sort of like, a couple other Bibles I don't know, like author Bibles I know was like the Silmarillion by Tolkien, which was basically sort of like the author Bible for the Lord of the Rings series. And I think Robert Jordan sort of like had sort of a pretty extensive Bible for his Wheel of Time series, where he wrote about things like Tel'aran'rhiod, you know, sort of, and he apparently, I think he had sort of like, I think he sort of like had created sort of like 500 different plant species just for this book, and basically came up with alchemical properties like for a pretty vast majority of them. And he had sort of like a really sort of convoluted sort of like spell casting mechanism for the story as well. I haven't read sort of like the Wheel of Time Bible, but yeah, but then that guy sort of pretty well dedicated sort of like his entire life to writing that story.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, of course, the sort of like, and then in others, like, there was a book series called Frostborn by Jonathan Moeller, and you can tell sort of he'd written sort of various languages and sort of histories for all the characters, because in his story, sort of elves lived for like 100,000 years or something, and they're sort of like, it was basically sort of like King Arthur sort of and his sort of like a bunch of people sort of from England, and ended up sort of like walking through this portal with Excalibur and a few other things. And so sort of like you had this sort of this human, like this population of humans on this planet, like on this distant planet that all spoke Latin. Obviously the whole book was written in English, but it basically sort of meant that this world, which was sort of filled with all these other sort of different creatures and races and everything else, all of them sort of had various histories and languages and stuff, and that came across in how place names and character names were covered.
Yeah.
Things like that, because it's sort of like, whenever I sort of run into a story sort of where they don't have consistency, it drives me absolutely insane, because it's like, you're writing for an audience that would think, like, that would be aware of this sort of thing. Like, come on.
Yeah,
be consistent.
In one of my blog posts, I actually do mention a point where they make a pretty nice step in Firestar's quest, in where I think a long time ago, my mum, when one lives alone, one doesn't need a name. I think a long time ago, my mother called me Scratch. 5 pages later, every cat is greeting him as, "Hello, Scratch, is that you?"
Yeah.
So it's like, and I use that to sort of say, like, you should read over what you've written or have some sort of reference of it, because you might not notice it, but your fans will, or your readers will.
Yeah, basically sort of like all these cats are sort of, that didn't know him, are basically like, "Oh, hi Scratch, how are you?"
Well, more, he may have known them, but he sort of insinuates that he hasn't used his name in years, and they all know his name, even though they clearly weren't his littermates.
Yeah. They're just like, "Oh, hi Scratch, blah, blah, blah." But, I mean, you could also sort of argue that word gets around.
Yeah, but he says, I think a long time ago my mother called me Scratch, so it suggests that since he has left his kithood and no longer living with his mother, he hasn't been called anything by anyone. That's what that line sort of suggests, because that's the exact line. I think a long time ago my mother called me Scratch. That is the exact line he says.
Yeah, but also sort of, which is sort of really curious, because it kind of means the cats don't name themselves. That's basically sort of like, because no other cat had named him, sort of like, he was like, "Oh, I don't have a name. My mum did call me this, but that's about it."
Well, some cats do name themselves or change their name, but it's like, in most cases, it seems, even rogues, it's just considered common practice for the parents to name them. I know in another book, one of the other series they wrote, the one called Survivors, which is about dogs. I read the first part of that, and it said their mother had named them all different things, but they now had new names. You know how an owner, when they adopt a dog or whatever, will often give them a name that they like.
Oh, yeah,
So it's kind of basically saying that, like, they had names like Squeak and Fluff and stuff, and they actually got actual names afterwards. Like, that's what their mother referred to them as. And then they were all saying, oh, it's like, oh, Squeak, I haven't seen you in ages. And it's like, my name's blah now. And it's like, oh, I've got a new name too. I'm called Lucky.
Yeah.
And it's like just accepted in their world that you will have a new name.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. Yeah. Yeah, but anyway, anyway, babe, so I've got to head out. I've got to head off.
Yeah. So,
Yeah. But anyway, sort of like hearing Fluttershy existing has been awesome. Yeah, I'll talk to you tomorrow, babe.
Yeah, okay. See ya.
Love you.
Love you too.
Oh, good night.
Night.
Love you.
Love you too. Okay, buddy. Good night.
Good night.
I'll see you tomorrow. Yeah, tomorrow.
You too, babe. I love you lots.
Love you too. I love you a lot too. Love you more than Warriors.
Oh, I love you more than Wheel of Time.
I love you more than Trixie.
I love you more than Pinkie Pie.
I'll see you tomorrow, man.
Yeah, I'll see you tomorrow too, babe. I'll text you. I'll say good morning in the morning.
Yeah, okay. See ya.